So I think one of the major reasons why India also lacks in achieving exponential manufacturing growth is also because we are competing with China in terms of prices, whereas Germany is competing with quality. Because I was reading about the Mittelstand companies in Germany, and I saw this map of Germany where Mittelstand companies are spread all across the country, and 80% of these companies were located in those towns which had a population of less than 1 lakh. And Germany, as of 2022, had 1,400 world market leaders. So these companies were not market leaders in Germany, they were market leaders across the world. And when I looked deeper into what was the fundamental reason why they were market leaders, I understood that they have hyper specialized in doing one thing. For example, there's a company that just manufactures fridges. That's all. There's a company that just makes wires. And there's also a company which has been making beer for a century. But they do it so well that they do not have to compete on the basis of price.
Well, I think that's a simplistic view, but let's go back to a little bit of the history of how Germany got here. Do remember that Germany was united into a country only in 1870.
Yeah.
So earlier it was actually a network of small kingdoms, and each one of these small kingdoms had a capital and some sort of a hub. When it then got united into a country in 1870 by Bismarck, these hubs were all over the place. So the way they worked, rather than the way it worked in other countries. So there are other developed countries where the logic worked differently.
Okay.
Okay. So for example, in the UK, there were very large clusters. So there were three very large clusters. One was in around London. There was one in the Midlands around Birmingham, and there was another further north in the north of England. There were so three big hubs, and that's basically where it happened. And then it has now a lot of deindustrialization has happened. So London has remained as the main hub now.
Okay.
Same thing has happened with France, with Paris. Paris is overwhelmingly the largest economic hub of. So this has not happened in Germany, partly because of history and the dispersed nature of it. Even in India, so history very often plays a role. So if you look at Gujarat, for example, Gujarat, because it was dispersed into a number of small kingdoms, interestingly, even today, it has large numbers of economic hubs. It has got, you'll have Rajkot, Ahmedabad, Surat, Baroda, and so on. They're all, by the way, many of these were capitals of small kingdoms and so on. I'll give the contrast with that with, say, West Bengal, which had one major hub, Kolkata, and so on. So history does play a role in some of it, how it develops, and sometimes the highly concentrated model can also be extremely successful. I mean, Japan has an extremely concentrated model with one really big city in Tokyo, and then one or two other hubs, Osaka or whatever. But Osaka is much, much smaller than Tokyo. So let's not confuse success with the peculiarities of a decentralized model of Germany. Nevertheless, Germany does it in this particular way. Now, Germany's model, which I think the more interesting part is, there is the issue of decentralization, which is in urban design and geographical, and that's a different conversation. Let me focus on this business of small specialized companies, Mittelstadt basically, which does an amazing job. And I think here also we tend to overstate the case. Many of these Mittelstadts feed into larger companies. So do remember that they are not entirely independent bodies from the bigger companies that they feed into. Nevertheless, it is true that Germany has this culture of many of these companies, and they have done an amazing job. So there is many things why it succeeds in doing this. One of them, of course, is this amazing system of apprenticeships that they have, where people they're there, and there are many other reasons for it. But the point that you made about Germany competing on quality and China competing on price is actually no longer true. China now is rapidly competing in quality as well. There are many areas where they are genuinely at the cutting edge, and much of that technology is learned from, stolen, whatever you prefer, from the Germans. So I think one of the real big problems that Germany will now have is being able to compete with this rapid growth of China and moving up the value chain and doing. So So I personally don't think there is a choice that India has of competing, going the German way or the Chinese way. The Chinese way competes on both fronts, and in many ways, while we cannot exactly replicate their model because our political system is different, etc., but there are a few very key things to learn here. First of all, go into an industry and in the beginning, do not get emotional about where in the value chain you are. Okay? Even if there is a big industry and all you're doing there is turning the screws, go into it. That's how China got into electronics, right? The first thing they were doing was just pure assembly. So do not, many people in India said, oh, why are we only going into, the lower end? We should go into the higher end. Hello. Before you can run, you have to walk. The same, very often you'll hear these sort of derogatory terms about, Indians are only doing cyber coolie work. Well, actually, you have to start by being a cyber coolie. In fact, India's entire software industry is based on a non-event. It's called Y2K. So don't have any emotions about dirtying your hands at the bottom of the pyramid. But then you have to have ambition. And, we have now shown ambition. Indians are showing ambition in the sense that you see when you say artificial intelligence is being developed by, these top Google, is that the other. Do remember that a lot of this is developed in India by Indians in the captives of these companies in India. Number one. Number two, the ambition that we have of moving up the value chain, of Indian companies doing it, that I think is something we need to encourage. So it's not the lack of ability of Indians. After all, Apple is increasingly making its phones in India. Foreign companies are able to, compete in various markets around the world based on Indian research, Indian development, R&D, and all kinds of things. Even Google Maps, that is used worldwide, is an Indian invention. It was invented in the Indian offices of Google. So Indians are able to do it. The question is, why is India's corporate sector? And I have now, for the last half an hour, 40 minutes, criticized Indian bureaucracy, government, etc., and the need to reform them. I think this is a criticism I can fairly make about India's corporate sector. Again, the lack of ambition. Okay, it is extraordinary that Indian companies, which are now global size companies, they are not small companies anymore. They are hugely profitable for the last several years, and the amount of R&D Indian companies do is ludicrous for their size. Okay, and Indian generics manufacturers. Okay, they're not small companies. Why aren't they the guys who are now creating cutting edge molecules? Maybe there are some rules and regulations, etc., that we need to change on the India side. Yeah, fair. That's what the government needs to do. But I think a large part of it is simply lack of ambition on our corporate sector. And we, the poverty of aspiration, which I often blame on other parts of the system, needs to also be, is also true of our corporate sector.
Poverty of aspiration.
Absolutely.
Like the word, sir.
Why are Indian companies not aspiring to be world leaders in certain things? And that will require you to invest in R&D. You go into the R&D departments of Indian companies, large Indian companies, and there are some notable exceptions. So, I'm painting them with a broad brush. But generally speaking, you wanted those German Mittelstand company, go and see them. Small companies doing enormous amount of research.
True.
Okay. Is it because our education system is not generating great scientists? I'm sorry, you go and meet these Mittelstand, they come from very mid-level, it's not the top engineering colleges in Germany, it's the middle ones. Even some of them have just been apprenticeships, so they're not highly educated in that sense. But there is a culture of continuous innovation that happens. Here, there is an unwillingness to dirty your hands. And that is very important. It's the engineers who need to run Indian companies. And it really bothers me that even where engineers did create Indian companies, the next generation of those family-owned companies, then become basically MBAs and become managers.
True.
They are not the guys going back there and doing masters in chemical engineering. Their dad who set up the company was a chemical engineer. This guy is a pretty boy who has got an MBA from fancy school in America, good at PowerPoint, but cannot actually fix the machine. And this is an issue. So I think we need to get serious about a culture that does this. And this, as I keep, we Indians are not being ambitious enough.
Hi guys, thank you so much for watching the Indian Business Podcast. If you find value in our work, please hit that subscribe button, because for you it might be a zero effort task, but for us that subscriber count is an important instrument to get great guests to our podcast and to make this podcast better for you. So if you find value, please subscribe.